Welcome. We are doing something really fun today, which is we're going to taste a bunch of Robustas. We're going to talk a little bit about Robusta, and yeah, that is the plan for today. Because I think Robusta coffee is a very interesting topic to talk about. There are a lot of, there's like obviously stigma with Robusta, with honestly a lot of like the newer varietals or things that are kind of quote unquote, I would say like on the come up, and I think it's worthwhile to explore these coffees and show you guys what is out there. But for today, I have two roasters here. One is Kaveri, and then this one here, which you guys have not seen before, is Heron Mark, right there. Roasters. So we have two roasters here. Okay, so we have Robustas from both of you guys here, and they are processed in a variety of different ways. But let's do a quick re-intro, because you've seen Tanya before, but we haven't seen you before on any of the videos. So let's do a real quick intro.
Yeah, so my name is Russell. I'm the owner and roaster for Heron Mark Coffee. And we specialize in only fine Robusta. So we have some stuff to try. Hopefully Brian likes it. We'll see today.
We know you specialize in a lot of the Indian coffees. And how come you are doing Robusta?
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of dive in fully to just Robusta. When I started, there was consideration of doing maybe, blends and incorporating Robusta, but I thought, let's just see what we can do with 100% Robustas, and here we are. So
we have two micro roasters here that specialize in, very specific areas in the coffee world, and both are, have regions and varietals that I think are really interesting to taste and explore. Especially, if you want to dive deeper in this coffee stuff, it is very worthwhile to explore what else is out there. So why don't we start and talk a little bit about what we have here. I'm gonna move these bags of coffee away so you guys can see the cupping bowls, but you can of course buy these coffees. They're available online. We'll link everything there. Always, good to, support roasters doing stuff like this, especially, very niche areas of coffee, I would say. So what do we have? Who wants to
I'll get started. Yeah, thank you, Brian. So, hi everyone. We have 5 Robustas on the table. At Kaveri, I specialize in coffees from India. And in India, Robusta production and processing is done with the same care and intention on quality and flavor as Arabicas. So I have 2 Robustas on the table. They're different varieties. One is an old Perdinia and another one is a C cross R. These are more common in India as Robusta varieties, and they're both natural processed coffees. Natural processed Robustas in India are just known as cherry Robusta, and that's the most popular way of processing and also exporting Robusta from India.
And are these at a lower altitude than Arabicas, or are they the same, or do they roast or grow on the same farms?
Yeah, so one is about 1,200 meters and it's grown alongside Arabicas. It's the same farm grows both Robustas and Arabicas, and it also goes through some specialty processing, which is anaerobic fermentation.
Okay, wow. And fun stuff.
And very carefully planned and thought of with the end flavor in the cup in mind. It's also in India, a lot of the coffee, pretty much all coffee grown in India is shade grown, including Robusta.
Oh,
Typically
wow.
Robusta plants do not need a lot of shade, and they grow well in sun, but the shade grown Robustas in India kind of help the crop mature and ripen all at the same time.
Cool.
Yeah, and so one is a 48-hour anaerobic fermentation. Another one is an 84-hour, it says anoxic fermentation. Okay. So it's very similar, but that's how the producers. The second one is actually much lower elevation. I think it's about 600 meters.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some funny Robustas on this side of the table. What do we have over here?
On that side, so we have two farms here. One farm on the very end here, this is going to be from Vietnam. And this is a honey process, and the variety is TR6. So Vietnam, obviously very popular for Robusta. I think second largest exporter of Robusta. Maybe it goes back and forth, second and first. But yeah, so this farm is very interesting. They grow both Arabica and Robusta, but the owner of this farm, he used to grow commodity grade Robusta, and one day someone comes by and starts to taste these beans that he has thrown out because birds were picking them. And they say, hey, can I buy these from you? And he's like, sure, I guess. Like, yeah, I'll roast them for you and you can have them. And so he found out that the birds were picking the, more ripe cherries. And so he thinks, oh, maybe I can, get into, fine Robusta. So he starts doing that, and that's his whole thing now. So that's a really interesting story behind that one. And then these two on the other end, they're both from the same farm in Ecuador. One is going to be a natural process, and then one is going to be a wash process. And the variety for each of these is actually something they have crossbred themselves, and they call it Ecu Robusta for Ecuador, of course. And these are super interesting. They're grown at 40 meters above sea level. So
40,
super low.
Jeez. Okay.
I find these ones super interesting, especially the natural. I hope you like this one, Brian. I think it's really, really interesting.
Well, let's get some water on it. So I think let's go water on it, and then I wanted to talk a little bit about specialty grade Robusta.
Do you want to do a dry aroma run?
Oh yeah, let's do a dry aroma run through of these. So I'll rotate around.
Sure.
Yeah. Wow. Just very interesting.
It's also nice that we don't have any Arabica on the table, because I think it's unfair to taste Robusta and Arabica.
Yeah, I agree. That's a big thing. Is a lot of people will, obviously want to compare this to Arabica, and you can. They're both obviously, but they're both obviously very different. So at the end of the day, it's kind of hard to say, well, this is just better than Robusta, because it's just gonna taste different.
Yeah, I mean, smelling these already, I'm like, you definitely can smell processing. Like the efforts that producers are putting in to, ferment these coffees and process them in a specific way. Like for 100%, you can smell that. What I think will be what's really interesting right now is like the Vietnam and the Ecuador and the Indian Robustas all, at least on the dry, very distinctively different, like region-wise. Like you can tell it is Robusta, but then it's the same thing. Like you take the same plant and you grow it in a different region. It's like the terroir there.
Exactly, the soil and everything is going to influence that at the end of the day.
I'm finding out, at least where I'm starting to exist sort of in some of this coffee stuff, is like I am indifferent to some of the varietals now, or I'm more of like interested in the processing. Like, what is this producer doing? Obviously, like, okay, if they're doing a really great job at like growing the plants and harvesting and whatnot, it helps that you start with that before you do processing. But like, I do think for a lot of these coffees, what we will taste, this is my hunch right now, I don't know if that this is going to be what is reality, is that we're going to be able to really taste how something is elevated through processing.
Yes, I think that's a really great point to make.
I don't know the landscape exactly of like how some of these coffees are grown and all of these farms, but like there is for sure a value proposition for producers to tap into like processing to elevate the quality of their coffee, especially with like these varietals that I think, or in this case Robusta, which kind of gets like set aside because it's like, oh, it's not Arabica, it's not as good. But then if you can make it taste as good, if not better, through processing, then I think that's incredible. And I'm already smelling, you're already smelling stuff like, oh, okay, yeah, there's definitely stuff done to these coffees.
I think that's also the point of specialty Robusta, because the benefit or the difference with Robusta compared to Arabica, from what I understand, from a producer and growing perspective, is it's easier to grow. It's more disease tolerant and drought tolerant. I'm not so sure. So there's a lot of talk of Robusta being a climate resilient or climate forward crop. I think there's a lot of research going on around that. What I learned from some of the farms that I visited is that Robusta can be very water intensive. So it needs to, have a lot of groundwater and irrigation for the crop to grow in bulk. But the nice thing about it is that all the cherries ripen at the same time. So when it comes to picking and processing, you can do it in a shorter span of time and with less labor than Arabica. For Arabica, like harvesting and picking, some people have to go 3-4 times to the same plant or the same area to pick all the ripe cherries just because they ripen at different times. And when it comes to climate challenges, with the weather being unpredictable during the harvest season, it can really mess up the schedule for the farmers when they're picking and harvesting.
Definitely.
Well, the first time I actually enjoyed a Robusta was at Origin. And there, the Robusta was there on the table with Arabicas. And, you're going around the table doing some tasting. And I honestly, at first go, did not notice which one was the Robusta.
And some people I know just have like a, an itch once they taste it.
Ooh.
It's like, even though it's not, as palatable in some cases, it's just like that X factor, I guess, that you kind of get addicted to. But for me, it was when I went to Vietnam for the first time and just was tasting their, local Robustas there. And just like that flavor profile that it gives is so specific and it just like stayed with me. So that serves as kind of like a base for what I know it to be. But then, it obviously gets much more expansive from what we've seen.
Cool. I think we can break.
Yeah, I'm very interested just to see the region differences. Like for me, I didn't even know they grew Robusta in like Ecuador, for example.
Right?
I didn't either for a while. But that's the interesting thing is they do grow it kind of more for like a local, interest in a lot of countries. They're definitely, they're just not exporting it a lot of the times. And it's just the clientele, I guess, that it's going to is not what we're used to.
Yeah, because like even outside of Robusta versus Arabica, like there are coffees in like Thailand, Indonesia, where like a lot of that consumption of that coffee only happens like literally on the farm or like in the region.
Yes.
So this is exciting to taste 3 different regions of Robusta. Ooh. Scary or funny. I don't know. Like in the enthusiast community, we always say it's a funny Robusta. Like what we are doing right now is a funny Robusta tasting.
Well, I was just reading the other day that there's like 190 varieties of coffee, and we're obsessed over just 2, or even just 1 if you're only tasting Arabica.
And those 188 make up like 1% though of coffee production. So it's hard to get our hands on them sometimes.
I think also what's cool about this exploration is the stigma that Robusta has of, tasting like tar and burnt tire, which is valid. There is definitely Robusta that tastes like that. But there's also Arabica that tastes like that.
Yes.
So it's all about the processing and the type of coffee you're getting.
The level of processing that you can get into.
Yeah.
But I also just feel that the higher end stuff or like the specialty grade Robusta stuff hasn't been explored very much until recently.
Yep.
So a lot of producers haven't tapped into like the potential yet. And I often relate this to Catamore, where like I tasted Best of Yunnan last year. I've been currently tasting some Catamores recently, and like you can literally taste the coffee get better every year. Like it is like exponentially getting better, right? Same thing with a lot of the coffees, Arabicas that are coming from India, and Robusta is like, I feel going to be that next one where people are going to figure out how to, producers are going to figure out how to, like, in this case, tame the coffee or push it in certain directions. Because, like, there is also, I think, the question that comes up, which is, like, Robusta, I think, on paper has, like, more caffeine, and the caffeine's equal bitter. So then how do we make the coffee taste less bitter? But then, like, I think you can have coffee. I mean, I'm already smelling some of these, and I'm like, some of these, like, you can smell the processing is really like doing doing a lot of stuff. So yeah, I do think this is something where it's like maybe just like not enough farmers or producers have like been planting this and like they haven't explored this yet.
Yeah. And then it's kind of going to be iterative. I think they're going to need feedback from us as roasters and consumers as well to know then what to kind of like head towards. And of course, we as roasters are learning a lot with Robusta because, like you said, more caffeine. It also has like a slightly different cellular structure. So there's just some differences that will come in roasting that don't really exist. Like on our local communities and stuff, we just don't know yet. So it's definitely a work in progress.
This is like going to be something that is going to be iterative, but like really fast iteration.
Yes.
I mean, I remember tasting Robustas like 2-ish years ago, and it's like you could tell that people were going for like some of the anaerobic processing, but then now looking at this, I'm like, okay, now there's like, like the fact that there's a washed Robusta is very interesting. Maybe scary. Taste the terroir, the terror. Maybe we'll see what happens.
I like that.
But I mean, smelling some of these, I'm like, it's honestly like a very interesting like palate or sensory expanding experience here.
Yeah, it sort of makes you explore these other areas of like the flavor wheel, for instance, that we don't usually look at maybe, and there's things to appreciate there as well.
Yeah.
I also wanted to point out we have the green coffee here as well as the roasted beans. Again, just to kind of take a look and see, a lot of the time when you see that tar smelling, tasting Robusta, there's a lot of like black and broken beans, but all these beans are super clean. Like if you were to just go through, it's really like clean, well sorted coffee. And that again shows the amount of attention that the producer put to put this bag of coffee together. That one's super interesting. You have to take a look.
This one is interesting. This is the green coffee. It's super dark.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited about
process.
That is a natural. Yeah.
That looks almost like
interesting. Wow.
eberry to me. Yeah.
Because nowadays I look at color of green, color of roasted, and I'm like, I have no idea anymore because of fermentation. Like these, it's like you have some of these coffees that are like hyper processed, and then it's like that is a light roast, but it looks like it's a dark roast, or the beans look like they've been like the greens have been processed in a certain way.
We're at 15.
Oh, we can go ahead. Yeah, but we'll start here, and then we will go around, and then we'll talk a little bit about what things taste like. Fast forward this and the power of video editing.
Yeah, this is Amrita Rashmi. I got both their Arabica Natural and Robusta Natural.
The Arabica is good. It's I have thoughts on that already. Wow.
This honey from Vietnam. The beans look almost similar to Arabica beans. Russell here has a lot more experience roasting Robusta than I do. This is my first year introducing Robusta into my offering.
Experienced Robusta roaster and then beginner Robusta roaster. What have you guys observed with roasting Robusta versus Arabica?
We were talking about that earlier. So I haven't roasted Robusta on a production roaster yet, mostly sample roasting. And it definitely, you don't hear the first crack as loudly and clearly as Arabica. And it requires a little bit more heat for roasting. That's my first impressions.
First impressions.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, definitely the first crack, the I guess non-existence sometimes of first crack is a little annoying as a roaster, but you can see it still on the curve, like in terms of your rate of rise. Also, as I mentioned before, the structure being different of the bean, it has more cellulose, so yeah, you sometimes have to give it more heat, like a faster rate, and then it has less sugar as well, so you have to be kind of careful that you're not like overdoing your, when you get to Maillard, like you don't want to, you just have to be cognizant that there's less sugar than you're used to.
Okay. Yeah. It's very interesting to taste the regions. Like you can
very notably.
Yeah, very distinctive. I mean, you can tell it's Robusta, but then like each of these has its own like profile.
Yes.
Wow.
That's why I think this is so important, because this is, if someone just thought of Robusta, they would not think of these differences between all of these coffees. So, looking at these different regions really shows that, we can get a big variety.
Yeah, this is great for breaking down the Robusta stereotypes.
Also, I've noticed that resting is very important with Robusta. I think they off-gas maybe a little slower. So definitely like a month at least in some cases, and even up to like a couple months is like really nice. So they definitely get better.
So my two coffees are aiming for a medium roast. Russell, what about your coffee?
Yeah, so I've in general liked to stick around medium, but actually for this natural, this is a funny story, a co-roast story. I was roasting for the SF Coffee Festival, and I hadn't roasted this natural at co-ro yet. So I was going about my business, on the ProBat, you have to empty the chaff from the vortex, and I usually do it every couple of roasts. So I was roasting, and I'm roasting this natural. All of a sudden, I look down, there's water on the ground, and look around the corner, and it's overflowing, and I'm, kind of freaking out. And Joel comes in, and he's like, "Don't worry about it, I got it, like, just keep roasting." But I was already too distracted, and I kind of just, I was like, I think I messed this roast up, so I stopped it pretty early, and I held on to that coffee, and I realized, wow, this is actually really good as like a light roast. So now I know, like, I can roast, I can push this one a little bit, roast it lighter, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
That does not taste like a light roast in the sense of, a light roast I'm familiar with Arabica.
Yeah.
But I definitely taste more of like fruit forward flavors.
This is not as light as that time that I'm describing either.
Yeah.
But it's lighter than I would have originally thought I'd put it at.
yeah, I mean, like, what's interesting about all of these is there is a level of complexity that I feel like is surprising. Like, on paper you'd be like, oh, this is Robusta, it's not going to have complexity in it, or like depth of acidity, or depth of sweetness, or clarity of flavors. And I mean, I'm getting like a very distinctive version of each of these. I guess we can talk a little bit about what these taste like.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know who wants. How do we?
I'm curious what yours are.
Yeah, why don't we start with-
Sure, I will start. So this is interesting to me. These two coffees distinctively to me have this Indian coffee flavor profile to them. So there's a lot of like earthiness, like nuttiness in it. But the interesting thing is like the level of bitters in these. It's not bitter forward. Like we get a lot of really interesting sweetness. So I've had this coffee in Arabica form, which is really interesting. So we had this coffee on X-Bloom, Arabica version, and then this is the
Natural process.
Yeah, also natural, and then this is the Robusta version.
Different varietals though.
Different varietals, but same farm and producer.
Same processing methods and same attention to specialty. Yeah.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that this has a lot of those similar flavor profiles as that, just like less acidity. That's like the main difference here. But like it's not like bitter forward. Like I've had Robustas that are like punch you in the face with bitters, and then because there's all of that happening, you perceive that as like, tire rubber or whatever. But this here has like a lot of really nice sweetness in it. It does have acidity in it, which is interesting. But it's not like, fruity acidity that I was having on the Arabica version.
Right.
But like I could see a lot of people really enjoying this type of flavor profile. Like
Definitely.
which is interesting too, because like this is not like, a dark roast in that sense.
Yeah. So that's almost like a classic dark roasted Arabica can have similar flavor profile as this Robusta.
Yeah, but like this is not a like dark roast Robusta, which is the interesting thing. Like you can get some of the, and also the thing is there's a lack of harshness. Like I feel like harshness is something that I would associate with a lot of Robustas. Not really getting that in these ones. This is interesting. This specific coffee is interesting because it's what I would classify as more advanced processing. So like I've seen producers do an anoxic fermentation on like some SL28s and whatnot. There's acidity in this, but similar profile of like Indian coffee. So like I'm basically like these two coffees, I'm getting like a different expression of Indian coffee. I would say that maybe I prefer this presentation of Indian coffee, where it's like there's the earthiness, there's such big body in these coffees. And still the thing that I'm not experiencing, like this, I get this really nice like sweet chocolate finish. There's like, I'm trying to pinpoint what is the exact type of acidity I'm getting at the beginning.
Yeah.
But there is like complexity, but it's complexity in like texture and complexity in the finish with these. I'm gonna taste this one again, so we'll go around the table. So that is like very distinctively Indian coffee terroir, in my opinion. But you also can taste like at the back, that is where Robusta is.
Yes.
Yeah.
The thing is at the back is where like...
It's definitely there.
Yeah, like there is that Robusta, like, you know, I could see some people say these being a little too harsh for them, but like for what it is, I think it's pretty clean.
Yeah.
For that expression.
This does have a nice acidity in it, though. Yeah.
The other thing that's worthwhile mentioning of those two coffees, and actually all of these, is usually when you have these coffees that are like processed in a certain way, when you like, we're like 20 something minutes off, right? Is like you'll be able to taste a distinctive separation between processing and varietal. Like you can tell like this is falling apart. I have not observed with any of these the distinctive separation there, where like things are falling apart, which is interesting. This coffee here is really nice also. Very tea-like, actually. For like, you would not expect that profile to exist in a Robusta when you think about like, bigger caffeine content.
That's a Vietnamese natural?
Honey
Vietnamese, yeah. And you can tell that there's Robusta in it, but the profile, instead of it being like earthy, and bigger. This is like, I really like this. It's very, much more tea-like, has a very nice round finish there. And I am trying to pinpoint exactly what type of acidity that exists in this, but it's just like...
I taste a little like malic acidity.
Yeah.
Yeah. But overall profile is tea for me.
Very much so. But it's still very like a smooth finish.
Super smooth, round finish.
Very round.
The thing also to note is the finish of this coffee, like, when you have these more processed coffees, or not even more processed coffees, but like these, newer varietals, sometimes like the finish might be harsh or the linger might be harsh. Not really experiencing much with these. The linger on this is like that nice tradition, the nice like Indian flavor profile, which is like that earthiness that I know a lot of people really enjoy. This is actually that cleaner, softer, rounder finish there. These two, I think, are really interesting as we move on to here. If you've had Robusta before, you already have the thing in your mind, you're like, okay, I'll give it another shot. These are like really good expressions of Robusta from India and Vietnam. Like, if you're used to those, if you have written those off, this is like, these are like very clean expressions of what is possible. These two are weirder, but these two are also, this is more like process forward, I would say. Like, which is super interesting. So we're getting a ton of acidity. I'm getting a ton of acidity in this natural. Yeah, wow.
That natural was something else. Yeah.
You get a lot of like red fruit acidity. The definition is there. And then you get a bit of that Robusta flavor profile at the end, right? Like, I like these types of coffees, and the wash one I want to talk a little bit about later, but I like this natural a lot because, like, obviously in today's landscape of coffee world, you can ferment your coffee in advanced fermentation, do all of this stuff, and you could cover up things.
Yeah.
This is like not exactly, or at least I don't believe the producer here, like tasting this, they're not like necessarily exactly trying to say, this is not Robusta, right? They're trying to say, this is what is possible with Robusta, and then, but you don't want to get rid of everything that makes what this coffee, tastes like.
You can't mask everything.
Yeah.
And that's not the intention.
That's not the point.
Yeah. But it's really interesting because like there is that Robusta flavor profile at the back, which I think is kind of an acquired taste personally, but also I do think this is one, as you mentioned before with your journey in coffee, it is something where it's like timing. It's like if you started off with this, you probably would like this profile more than Arabica. And a lot of people, do have that type of experience. And it's very, all this is very subjective. How does it relate to your memory and all of that?
Right.
But like, as somebody who mainly drinks Arabica, this is really interesting. Like, there's definition of acidity. There is sweetness. And there's a very distinctive profile in this coffee here. You can tell it's a natural. There is like, a little bit of that pulpiness, a little bit of that funkiness.
Yep.
But it is very complementing with the Robusta flavor profile. That's weird.
It's weird. It's weird,
right? Yeah. And then the wash, which is, this is the only wash coffee here, is also kind of the same thing. It's like, not as funky. There is acidity in it. I mean, I think it's also like, maybe red fruit or citrus, but it is, not trying to mask Robusta. I mean, actually, honestly, like, this is incredibly clean if we really think about it, right?
Yeah.
I will say though that this is the first time I have tasted washed Robusta before. Like, I do think, washed Arabica from Ecuador also, might have a little more like complexity. Like, I don't want to say that this is one-dimensional. Like, that is what I think people could say. It's a bit like, you can tell there's like one part of acidity. And this would be interesting to taste like the next harvesting season. Like, how much can you go? Because, when you think about like washed Catamore or washed, even some of the washed like S795s, right?
Yeah.
Like, those are scary to taste. You'll be like, do I really want to be tasting like all of that? So the fact that there is acidity in here and it's harmonious, it's tied together to the Robusta flavor profile is like already an incredible, like that's really, really good. And then like in the coming years, because like this is how good it is now, it's only gonna get better, right? I think what will be interesting to explore with this wash Robusta is like, can they start bringing definition, like more complexity and layering in the acidity? Like the acidity's there, but where is it going to go?
And in the washed Robusta, you're actually tasting the terroir and what goes into the soil for this plant to be bearing the fruit.
Yeah, but yeah, like these all have very distinctive flavor profiles. I actually think the Indian Robustas here, they have like that really nice earthiness, big body, for sure, big body. But you can tell the processing is elevating the body there, the finish, and all of that. Super interesting. This is like drinking like a daily, like a tea, basically, a clean, nice, floral. There's florality, which is interesting. Tea. And then these are like acidity forward. But in all of these, there is this Robusta flavor profile. And the thing that, I'm observing here is like, I feel that maybe I'm getting really caffeinated now. Like, I actually do feel that it does feel like there's more caffeine. Yeah. But I'm not tasting any of like the bitter.
The bitters.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't taste any bitterness.
None of these have like that rubber bitter flavor that is off-putting usually.
Russell, didn't you mention that these coffees are grown at 40 meters?
40 meters above sea level.
Which is incredible considering, we associate acidity to elevation at which coffee is grown.
Yeah, and like, I don't taste any sort of like, I do taste some funkiness in here, but it's not like, super bad pulpiness, like this tastes like they're, it's just been overdone, which is really interesting. Maybe that's like what the Robusta, varietal is bringing. Or that's like what Robusta is bringing in, right? Like maybe some of it's just like balancing it out.
Adding that over funkiness.
Yeah, which is interesting. But these all are very, very distinctive. This first one, it tastes like a specialty chocolate bar. Like, if you've ever tasted like specialty chocolate, that's what that tastes like.
Like 80%.
Yeah, but like high-end chocolate. This here is also like specialty chocolate, but like there's a fruit component in it. Yeah. And the linger on my palate is that like Indian coffee flavor profile. It's like just, it's like nice. There's bitterness in that, but it's like nice bitter. It's not harsh at all. Lingering on my palate like a really nice dark chocolate. And again, that's not like a dark roasted coffee, that's what's interesting. Like, that's not dark roast.
Right. Yeah.
So we're tasting the profile here of both Indian coffee and Robusta.
Right.
Very
Yeah.
cool. This is like a big bodied tea, like very
It
tea
is,
like,
yeah.
but very, I mean, like texture. The texture on these
Texture is very
so interesting. This one here, like you can have this on a table with other coffees, and I think people would be very, very confused. Acidity is there.
This one turns heads, certainly.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is like maybe because this is what Robusta tastes like, is that all the acidity in all of these is very round, but it's like big and bold acidity, but it's not sharp or anything like that. And I feel like with Arabica, right, you get like this coffee would be like have a much more like crisper acidity.
Yeah.
This here has like a loud but softer presentation of acidity, and that's like kind of what I've observed in all of these. But they all have this like, I mean, I think what's been interesting for me, the takeaway from here is like, yes, obviously there's really, really cool processing and all that's going on, but like it's the texture. Like the texture of all these coffees on your tongue is really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that is something that it has going for it specifically is that body. Not sure what gives it that exactly. I think there is something about it that perhaps like the structure or the amount of oil that it's in compared to Arabica. But yeah, certainly the body is there.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think it's worth talking about how to brew these coffees. I was talking to Russell about this earlier. In India, all coffee, I mean, most Indians enjoy their coffee with milk and sugar. And so often Robusta is blended with Arabica for your espresso blends. And from what I have learned is like when you're doing a Robusta blended, pulling a shot of Robusta blended espresso, there's what Robusta adds not just the body, but it also extends that feeling of like the crema and those oils. It gives it that much more depth to the coffee for espresso. But I've never experienced Robusta outside of an espresso coffee.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to Russell about how he likes to brew his coffees.
Yeah.
And
I've been drinking this at home with using a pour over, and some of the big differences for anyone who's looking to make this at home, perhaps. But I would say lower temperature. I'm making this at 85 C, and I'm being pretty gentle with my pour as well.
Yeah.
Especially this is very, you can tell why. And then the grind size is kind of interesting. So although it's lower altitude, you would think, less dense, but then that cellular structure is like different. And I think it's also harder, like Robusta is, if you measure the hardness of a Robusta bean, I think it's harder and kind of a little more brittle than Arabica. So when you grind it, it can sometimes be inconsistent. So that can affect your flow rates. Definitely with espresso as well.
Huh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, like right now, like these two would be absolutely amazing as like milk-based, like for your milk-based drinks. I mean, yeah, really. Are you gonna offer these as espresso?
I'm doing 100% Robusta release, and people can enjoy it how they want. It's sort of like a
really
brewer choice. But yeah, I think it would be great as an espresso. I'll probably do a extra bold espresso blend as well. But for those, so often, especially for Indian coffee drinkers who are used to Robusta blends, my 100% Arabica coffee is too weak for them. They're like, this is not strong enough.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, I get what you need. And this is 100% Arabica, so appreciate the flavor for that. And once I add the Robusta, then they'll get their strength. But for people, I think, who like big, bold coffees, they can drink this black, brewed as a French press or pour over, and still enjoy it. Because it doesn't have that bitter aftertaste. It's really like nice and clean on the finish. And I think it could be enjoyed black as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm observing that like those two just have such big body, and I think really also it's the Indian coffee flavor profile that's in there that like even emphasizes the body of Robusta that we're tasting. The Vietnam one is really interesting. I mean, I guess like a lot of people will think like, oh, Vietnamese coffee, I need to like then do like thin, and I need to like add condensed milk.
Right.
I actually think those are probably a little bit better for that.
Exactly.
In this example. But this is a really interesting coffee because it has this, it's like drinking a really big bodied tea. which is like really interesting. And you wouldn't expect to get some of those like tea notes in Robusta, but also like in the context of the coffees that exist in the world, like there is like an anaerobic fermentation in some of these, but there's no like craziness that we have in these coffees. So these are all like pretty cleaner expressions of processing in Robusta, especially these two here, which I think these are just like fun. It's like 40 meters, like what is that? How does that even work? And like these are coffees I would totally brew, like pour over and try it out, because like I think pushing acidity in these newer varietals, or even like this is Robusta grown in Ecuador. It's like I didn't even know that was a thing. That is really, really fun. So like of the coffees here that are on this table, like if you guys can go pick them up, like totally do that, because I think it's just super worthwhile to try what is out there, especially for your own growth as a taster. Plus, also, it's just fun. Like these coffees are fun. It's like, what is going on here? I didn't know this existed, right? So yeah, just that's all for today. Wanted to thank Tanya and Russell for bringing these really cool Robustas here, funny Robustas as we'd call them. And I'll put links below on all the coffees. I think people, at least like my group, will want to taste the anoxic and then the natural. And the anoxic, natural, maybe the swash here. Cool. So we'll link the coffees below, we'll link the socials and all of that. And if you guys have any questions, let us know. But if you want to see more videos about Robusta and all of that, let us know. But otherwise, thank you guys so much. Thank you too for taking the video.
Thank you for giving us the time of day.
Yeah, but yeah, see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.